Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our Action and MITRE webinar. My name is Sullivan Sanders, a marketing coordinator here at Action Associates. Just some quick housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be recorded, so you are muted, and the link to the recording will be sent to you shortly after the webinar concludes. During the presentation, please utilize the Q&A feature to ask any questions if needed, and they'll be answered throughout the presentation and during the Q&A session at the end. And if you experience any technical issues during the webinar, you may also use that Q&A feature and we will try to assist you. We have also provided a brief post-webinar survey, which is already available in your webinar console. We ask that you please fill that out as your feedback is important to us. Without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce today's presenters. We're joined by Sarah Marks and John Lawfer. Sarah is currently the partnerships lead at MITRE, bringing a strong background in construction and technology. And John is a go-to-market team member at MITRE with over 3 years of experience in the industry. I'm going to go ahead and hand on over to Sarah to get us started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate the time, and we're excited to share more about MITRE today. I am going to kick off by showing just a quick presentation of kind of MITRE and overall who we are, and then going to share the screen over to John, and John is going to give a demonstration of MITRE. But just to kind of share today, again, kick off MITRE introduction, talk about how MITRE integrates with Sage, and then go ahead and do MITRE demonstration and Q&A. To kind of kick things off today, I'd like to kind of zoom out a little bit and kind of talk about why MITRE started and kind of how we fit in the industry. One of the statistics that I think is most intriguing is that statistically, construction labor productivity is really falling short. Over the last 50 years or so, construction is the only industry that is getting worse at labor productivity. There are 8 million Americans that wake up every day and work in construction, and yet this year, to meet construction needs, we need 400,000 new construction workers. And still, we're just not producing at the level that we used to. There's year over year a 1% decrease in construction productivity. However, we have all of these tools, right? I'm sure that everyone on this call has added at least one new tool, whether it be software or hardware or something to try to be more efficient. And really, the question is why? Why are we getting worse at construction, or are we? And really, there's a lot of factors to that, right? Construction is hard in general, right? And if you kind of look at the kind of macroeconomic factors, there's more regulatory factors than ever in construction. There's supply chain issues, right? Getting things from overseas and tariffs and those sorts of things. But also we're building bigger projects that are just tougher to deal with. And there's also the need to build those projects faster than ever. The owners are wanting these products delivered faster, and there are things like the New Deal, where it really is enticing to build projects faster. And so right about now, you're probably thinking, well, okay, how do we do that? And it's been tough, right? There's been a lot of new softwares that have entered the market and promised to help you do that, and maybe not delivered. And that happens to be something that a lot of contractors have seen. They're either dealing with these kind of generic systems that have fallen on their laps, or something have to kind of stitch together a fragmented tech stack that has not worked for them, or just gone back to a very generic manual process because everyone knows, especially in accounting, that Excel will never fail them. And so go back to the tried and true. And really, that's kind of where our founders have kind of realized, especially in payroll and HR, that MITRE can really help kind of transform the industry and help you actually kind of start to change that labor productivity curve. So really how MITRE is thinking about this is really starting to not be just another software to add to the stack, but really something that is going to help you make sure that you are actually building with confidence and feeling supported and empowered to actually build better. So we think about that in kind of three buckets and three problems that we're really trying to solve for. The first one is being able to actually have real-time job costing. With real-time job costing, that will really enable you to have better estimating, more accurate bidding, and course correct in real time. Obviously, construction has very small margins as it is, and the higher the margin, the more profitable you'll be able to be, but also just the more secure you'll be able to be in this industry. The second piece is compliance, especially in HR and payroll. Being able to really feel confident that you are in compliance at all times is really important. If you are handling any sort of unions or certified payroll, it becomes even more important to be compliant because the regulations in those areas are even more severe. And the last piece is connected systems. If you are in any way dealing with having to do duplicate entry or manual entry across more than one system, it is a huge waste of time. It also adds the ability for you to get out of compliant or accidentally enter something incorrectly. And so MITRE is really trying to make sure that we are really allowing you to have confidence in your data there. So the MITRE platform is broken out into three different product lines that John will go into in our demonstration. But human capital management, which covers everything from onboarding and applicant tracking all the way through payroll and benefits. Field operations, which goes from time tracking to scheduling and daily reports. And then our expense management tool, which covers our corporate card program and reimbursements and per diems. And all of that is supported with our integrations and our support team. Today, we have over 800 contractors using MITRE. And for a company that is about 4 years old, that is pretty great. We're really proud of that number. And really, the reason that we've been able to grow so quickly is because we only focus in construction. And for those of you who have implemented other softwares around payroll and HR, I think you'll immediately be able to see the difference when you work with MITRE in the fact that everyone from our sales team to our launch team really is able to speak the language that you speak as far as construction and really understand what you need from a compliance piece, from a support piece, to really excel for your team. We are also backed by modern APIs, which I spoke about just a minute ago, and I'll talk about in a minute here when we go into integrations. But making sure we integrate with all of your tools from accounting, which we'll talk about today, but also your field service management tools. So if you are using MITRE for timesheets, that's wonderful. But if you have a field service management tool that you're already using, like a Procore or a BuildOps, we have an integration with those, which is wonderful for you to be able to pull in those timesheets from there as well. Moving on to the integrations piece, something that I think is very relevant to those of you on this call, if you are using Sage 100 or Sage 300, I think what's really great to know is that MITRE can be a really powerful bridge for your team as you're looking at Intact. From the front end for your team, MITRE operates the same way, whether you're using a legacy system or Intact. So it's really easy for you to transition. So if you look at Intact and you say, hey, this is something that we know we want to get, or we know we're going to move to, but we really have a payroll problem or a need that we need to solve right now, and you can certainly purchase MITRE now, make that HR and payroll transition now, and then change to Intact in the future. And it's a very easy transition. Action has helped several of our clients do that already. And it's pretty painless on the back end. Now, changing ERPs is never painless, so I won't put that in your mind. But I will say on the MITRE side, our team makes sure that you are very well supported through that transition, and the back end is easy to do. So want to make sure that you are aware of that piece. Moving on to the integrations, this is our maps for Sage 100, Sage 300, and Sage Intacts. You'll notice here that they get more robust as we move up here. Sage Intact is the integration that is a full API integration because obviously it is a cloud solution. But what all these integrations look like is your people data will live in MITRE and your project data will live in Sage. And the information will sync that way. John will kind of touch on this in his demonstration as well. But these integrations are pretty simple in how they send information back and forth. They will automatically send information once a day. However, they can send information automatically if you click the button, if you need to sync something, if you onboard a new project or onboard a group of people at once. All right, I think that is the bulk of the presentation, so I can hand it over to John.
Awesome. Yeah, and if you don't mind, Sarah, I will steal the screen share here. Perfect. And if y'all were with us a couple of weeks ago when we did our MITRE demonstration, I think we spent a majority of the time kind of going through some of the HRIS payroll aspects. Today, we'll drill into this middle bucket here, which is the field operations piece. And please feel free as we're kind of going through this, drop questions in the chat, or if there's another direction you really want to see or a piece of the MITRE system, drop that in there as well, and we can try to tailor that to the group we have on today. But the field operations piece, as you can see here, overwhelmingly, right? How are we collecting data out in the field? So obviously that's going to be collecting the labor hours. But then our customers are starting to do, a lot of other things out there, like equipment tracking and the costs associated with that, tracking quantities at the cost code level for production reporting, scheduling and tracking when folks are clocking in and out to set assignments, and just making sure folks are actually there during the time they're supposed to be there. And then also generating daily reports or work logs just based on the work that was performed. A lot of our customers are starting to attach that to invoices that they're sharing with their customers, just to sort of summarize what was done on the project, who was there, the weather for the day, various things like that, which we'll kind of go through what one of those daily logs looks like. I think on our end, we'll primarily focus on the Intact integration today, as this has been some really exciting development we've done with the Action team and Sage in general, with the field operations piece, mainly around equipment tracking. So, y'all will see these slides here, and we're happy to share these with you as well, so you have a better idea. But really, the integration with Intact, 300, 100, all API based on the way down, where we are pulling down that work breakdown structure. What do I mean by that? Projects, cost codes, departments, location, classes, GL accounts, etc. Everything that you would set up in your ERP will pull down and be mimicked in MITRE. So as we're submitting time, we're processing payroll, we're breaking out those hours and labor costs across those different dimensions in your ERP for your job costing. But what we started to do recently is add additional dimensions, like in Intact. If we're setting up an equipment as a non-stock item, we can sync that down into MITRE and associate a cost rate with that and track that on a employee level or just on a project level, to see what equipment was used and what costs are associated with that. And then we will sync those back to Sage Intact, similar to how we sync regular timesheets, just hitting purchasing transactions. So obviously we're happy to share this with folks and go into any other areas outside of field ops on a follow-up demo. But today we'll kind of focus on some of those core aspects in the system. So if we pull up the main MITRE dashboard, and I can see some folks on this call who are currently working with our team already, so probably familiar for some of y'all. But if we come down here into settings, just to really sort of drill into that integration, everything between the two systems can be set up on a daily sync. So again, all of those different dimensions that we're pulling down from your ERP, we'll see here. And the daily sync happens overnight. So just any projects that have been updated, closed out, we change the address, whatever it might be, that will just stay up to date between MITRE and Sage Intact. But also, if there's ever a need to come in here and do a real-time sync, we can always click in and say, hey, fetch jobs that have been modified since today's date, and we will automatically pull down any projects that have been updated or changed since today. So super helpful. We don't do a ton of work in our Sage Intact environment, so there's not any updates. But if I go back a couple days, you'll see, hey, here are the jobs that have been changed since July 1st. We could sync down Boston Commons, and that's available for your team to clock into or look at within MITRE in real time. So important to call out there. Everything can be set up on a daily sync to stay up to date, but if we ever need a real-time push or pull to pull down projects, push back payroll costs, we can always come in here and do that real time. If we come up here on the left-hand side, kind of clicking into work, this drop-down really provides a lot of what's in that field operations module, right? All of our timesheets, equipment, scheduling, daily reports, quantity logs. I think kind of clicking in and starting with the schedule, this is just a really easy sort of drag and drop view where we can filter this by specific departments, by specific crews. Right now we have it sorted by team member here on the left-hand side, but if we wanted to do this by project and see all the different schedules there, we can very easily toggle between those. If we go ahead and click in here to, Alan's active assignment, we can pull this up and see, the job, the address associated with it, equipment we've set up on the project, start date and time, who's assigned to this project. If I wanted to click in and edit any of this information, I could very easily assign new pieces of equipment to the job, adjust the start dates, add a description, attach any files, or just come in here and start to add additional team members. Very easy as well to, schedule by specific crews or different types of employees. If we're, wanted to put a all hands meeting on our project manager's calendar, we could come in here, schedule that, go ahead and update it. And then as soon as you make any of those changes, you'll see down here, we can come in and actually send a broadcast to the team members. So this is super helpful down here in our chat feature. We have embedded SMS text really throughout all modules of the system. But this is a super helpful workflow just as we're scheduling and things are happening on the fly. If we make changes, we can come in here, pull in the folks from this scheduled assignment and just shoot them an SMS text message. So, this is outside of their MITRE app. They'll receive an individual SMS text from a number unique to your MITRE instance. So, your team's able to store it as, MITRE company back office, and they'll always be able to text back and forth with that number, get updates on their schedule changes, things like that. Additionally, an exciting piece of MITRE we rolled out recently tied into the scheduling piece is the attendance reporting. So this essentially allows you to, based off the schedules that you're doing, especially a lot of folks who have their team clocking in and out in the field, there's a lot of geolocation bells and whistles, so we can make sure they're actually clocking in on the job site and not before they get there. But we also now can do the attendance reporting, which essentially create those schedules, and based off the schedule, surface warnings if folks are clocking in too early or too late based off the different policies that you've set up. So obviously there's, no show or no call reports that we can surface and logs we can show. But in our MITRE policy here, we can click in and understand, the different rules behind the attendance log here. And essentially, if we want to create a policy that is, hey, we should surface a warning immediately. So in real time, anytime somebody does not clock in, we'll probably give them a little bit more leeway than 3 minutes here, but 15 minutes from their start assignment, which is just pulling from the schedule. And based on this policy, we can assign this to crews, types of employees, et cetera. And so based on this policy, we can say who from, our team should get notified when somebody, does not clock in within 15 minutes of their set assignment. So same thing for clock out. You can create no-show policies as well. So it just gives your team a lot of flexibility again. If we do have folks that we're tracking time out in the field via the individual employees clocking in, clocking out, or on a kiosk or tablet where they show up and do that on a foreman's device, we can create these policies to just based off the schedule automatically notify your team and just, maybe we're taking action on it. Maybe we're just keeping track to see, if we have any repeat offenders over time and need to address that with them. But just a really exciting feature that's tied into the scheduling. So just as your team is, creating those schedules, we can track, are folks actually showing up on time and leaving when they should be. Obviously, that's, again, if we have employees responsible for their own time clocking in, clocking out. And as I mentioned, the scheduler with the attendance tracking is a great tool, but also there's all of those geolocation features as well. So we can see like where folks are clocking in and out. You can drop a geofence. So we'll pull down the job's address from your Sage instance and just automatically in this instance, create a geofence or radius around the job site of 2.5 miles. So you can build in what that should be. You can also do site-bound clock-in, meaning they will not even be able to clock into the project till they're standing within the geofence that your team set up. As well as GPS breadcrumbs, mileage tracking, just to make it very easy to see where folks were traveling throughout the day, especially if they're clocking in and out to like drive times between projects. So ton of bells and whistles there. We won't actually pull up the mobile app and go into that, but obviously if any of this is applicable to folks on the call, we would love to set up additional time just to kind of go through what that would look like with your specific roles. And I'd say a majority of customers are doing clocking in, clocking out, or using the kiosk feature. We do also have tons of customers who will just have foremen or supervisors do this workflow via sort of like a grid entry view within MITRE. And that's usually PMs or foremen managing this for their team, which, from a tablet or computer, very easy process in MITRE. Everything is this sort of pivot table function, so we can build out custom reports. Right now, we have this grouped by team member, job, cost code, meaning on the left-hand side here, we can see all of our employees. When we drill in deeper, the next piece up is that job, and then from there, the cost codes that they were working on throughout the week. If we wanted to, we could flip this report on its head and say, hey, I actually want to look at the projects that I am running. We can also add filters in here to say, hey, we're going to create a report for John. It's only going to be, Adam's crew, and he should only have access to those employees and those projects. So, you can build that out and save it as a template so they're able to come in here and access that. But regardless of how they prefer to review and input labor hours, if we click into Interstate Highway 103 here, we can see, we're now in the project's time card. We can see the employees, the cost codes that they're working on. If we wanted to add earning types, most folks are just letting MITRE automate the overtime. But then we can plug in their hours across the cost code that they were working on. If we need to add a row group, maybe they were on multiple cost codes, we could do it that way, and potentially split this up across two different cost codes on this project. If we care about clock in and out, I don't have a template saved for clock in and out currently, so it might look a little messy, but we can build out this template with what headers do we need to see, and do we actually want to see clock in and out times, or have foremen be editing clock in and out times when they're doing this, or adding notes to the employees' hours. So a lot of flexibility from the project timesheet. Additionally, though, if we close out of the project timesheet and we said we wanted to go, one by employee, rather than clicking in on Interstate Highway, when we drop it down, we can come into Alexia's specific timesheet. And now, rather than team member here, we have Alexia up here. We are looking at projects, cost codes, their earning type, and adding in the hours, or we could flip to the clock in and out view there. So a couple of different options there. I'd also say too, if we're familiar, or a lot of folks, we have the same set of employees working on a bunch of different cost codes on the project. We do also have a preset view where you can configure, hey, what are the cost codes that I need to see? I might have 10 on this project, and then who's the employee that I would just be able to come in and now allocate to across his across all the cost codes that he was working on for that day. So a number of different views just to make it easier, depending on what your team's tracking, for those foremen to just bulk allocate hours across projects and cost codes that employees have been working on. The next piece I'd say too, we hit on it, was the equipment, which obviously will sync this down from Intact, and your team can set up the equipment with the cost rate associated with it. You could make equipment timesheets separately on their own, straight from here. You could make them as you're creating a daily report, or as a setting, if your team is having associating the equipment with an employee, typically, maybe we get rid of earning type and we wanted to add equipment to that timesheet drop down for our foremans. Now, when they come to their pay period view and maybe they have it saved by job and then team member, when they click into a project to allocate time, now I actually have an equipment field and I can associate equipment with their hours. And so we'll track, this will create a separate equipment timesheet associated with the equipment rate and therefore the cost of operating the equipment. So a lot of really cool functionality there just to track not only the miscellaneous labor spend that we're going to break out on projects, or your fully burdened labor cost, but also starting to track some of that equipment costs associated with operating those projects. The other big piece to this, I'd say, daily reporting and quantity logs. So within daily reports, just to give you guys an idea of what one looks like, very easy for your supers or foremen to create this out in the field, just pulling in timesheets that have already been created or creating the timesheets from this view here. But essentially what this does is it allows you to pull in timesheets, add notes. If we're tracking quantities or equipment on that project, we can pull those into the daily, add additional notes, attach photos, documents. MITRE will automatically pull in the weather based on the job's address for the day and summarize it. If you're capturing signatures, you can do that. But a lot of our customers will use this because it generates a very clean looking PDF after your foreman has pulled in timesheets, added equipment, quantities, notes, etc. And so folks will attach this to their invoices when they're billing customers, because it'll pull in, company logo, all of the job information, the summary of the weather, who was on the project, what cost codes were they working on, when did they clock in and out, if we're tracking things like, confirming they weren't injured, their hours. And then from here, we can see any notes they added in, the equipment that was in use, quantities they're tracking, and any photos that they attached. So very cool process there. And if we actually click in and see what it looks like, kind of going through and building out this daily report from scratch, very easy process from the mobile app, which I'd say is where most folks will likely be doing this out in the field. But it essentially, depending on what you're capturing in your dailies, you'll have these fields preset so they can go through and, either add in timesheets straight from here, or it'll pull in the existing timesheets that they've already created via one of the other views if, employees are clocking in and out themselves. Equipment hours, and then if we associate that with team member as well, that works. Quantities, so just 50 units at each of these cost codes. Notes, photos, documents, so we can have them kind of go through and complete this workflow. And then once they do, it'll go through an approval process that your team has set up, and ultimately, they'll have that clean PDF for to share with the customer once it's approved. The other piece to that, obviously, quantities, we can just build those out similar to equipment timesheets, right? If they wanted to come into quantities and do that, maybe we're not creating daily reports, and so we're not actually doing that workflow within a daily, you can come into quantity logs and just create a quantity log from scratch, similar to an equipment timesheet, where we could say the quantities, what job and what cost code we want to associate that to. And all of that will be tied back to like at the job level. If you have those budgets set up, we can come into production tracking and just understand the different quantity logs that have been submitted, what's been approved, and then ultimately, once it's approved, we can see, the cost rate associated with each of these activities, or cost codes, the estimated quantity, the actual quantity, and then just, the progress that we've made so far, and just understanding the percent to complete. So, really cool workflow if your team is used to tracking those quantities today. I know a lot of Sage 300 folks using heavy equipment and production tracking. This has been a big piece for those folks as we've transitioned up over to Intact. So really cool workflows there. I think outside of that, obviously, number of different ways to capture those time and equipment costs, and obviously the equipment will go back to Sage separately. But then from there, I think a big piece of MITRE is all of those modules that Sarah walked through. The human capital management, field operations, expense management. It's all built one system. So as soon as those timesheets go through whatever approval policy your team has set up, and it's certainly not a one size fits all based on your different departments and types of employees. So you can define, how many steps are there in that approval process and who's involved at each step. But once those timesheets do flow through and ultimately go through all of those different approval inboxes, those are just sitting in payroll where they're ready to be processed. And the payroll team will have the same level of reviews and reports as the folks, supervisors or foremen who are actually doing the approval of timesheets. So again, if we come into this, payroll we're a couple of weeks behind in our demo environment, but we could run these reports. Again, maybe they prefer to have it grouped by team member and then the earning type, so they could come in here and understand what is regular versus overtime versus PTO. Maybe we actually just want to see how many overtime hours we're going to pay out or PTO for this pay period. So we can essentially group and filter these reports however are needed, and then save these different templates just to make it easier for payroll to do that review process. Obviously we hope that there's a lot of confidence after it's gone through that initial approval process, but very easy to run different reports, both from the work week view, as well as if we just wanted to take a look at individualized timesheets. We still have that sort of pivot table functionality where we could say, hey, I want to group this by team member, to just see all of their hours associated with each team member. And maybe I want to create a flagged report where I can say, hey, show me anybody that has greater than 40 hours or less than 40 hours, and just save this template so that I can automatically surface those outliers or folks who might be over or under the 40-hour work week. I think too, before we jump into payroll, and we hit on this a little bit in our prior demonstration, but didn't go into it too deep. It's just as folks are submitting time, most of our customers are doing some level of prevailing wage, or we're signatory to unions and juggling pay rates. So I think one of the key aspects here as well is, as folks are submitting those hours and they're going through that approval process, one thing we take a lot of pride on here at MITRE is just automating a lot of the calculations involved in this. So the differing pay rates, the overtime that's associated with hours. And so there's a lot of functionality, built in on the back end just to make this easier for folks and have them not have to do those manual allocations. I know when we were creating timesheets from the pay period view, we did have that earning type drop down, which is absolutely fine. We do have some customers who prefer that their team breaks out regular versus overtime versus double overtime when their foremen are keying in hours, and that's completely fine. But we also have a number of flexibility to create different overtime logic for your specific unions, or however you have this chopped up. So we could come in here and say, hey, for our ironworkers union, or for our Davis-Bacon rates, we want to create an overtime rule and associate it to all projects. So essentially just coming in here across all of the days of the week and defining what is overtime, what is double overtime, is it after a certain hour was worked, at a certain time of day should it kick in, after the 7th consecutive day, is it just automatically overtime? So we can start to build in these rule sets. So as folks are submitting hours, they're really just worried about getting it right? On the right job, on the right cost code for these many hours, and they can have confidence that MITRE will automate the overtime downstream. So once we have those rules, that's a super powerful tool that we can build out, but then we can actually take those rules and say, hey, within a specific union, we now want to attach the overtime rule that we just created to this pay rate table. And so pay rate tables in MITRE, can be prevailing wage rates, where we click into Adams County and we understand all of our prevailing wage classifications, the base rate, the fringe, or we'll also use these for our folks who are signatory to union contractors to track all of the union rates, being the classification of the base rate we're paying them, but then also all of their different fringes that were broken out on the back end. So really powerful tool here is allocating the overtime rules to your specific pay rate tables. And then what we'll do is, as we win a prevailing wage project or we're working in a job in a different local, we'll actually sync that job down from Intact or 300, and then you'll take the pay rate group and attach it to the project so that we know how to automate overtime, what rates those employees should be paid on those projects. So a lot of power there, and then also just the nuances between unions and prevailing wage. Unions being different reciprocity agreements, right? So if we are signatory to Local 1, but we go do work in Local 2, we can create essentially routing rules for how the fringes and how the folks from Local 1 should be paid when they're working on a project in Local 2. So, when someone from Local 1 goes and works in Local 2, do we want to pay them the work local base rate? Do we want to pay them the Local 1 rate? Should we just use the higher of the two? From there, for fringes, should those be applied to the work local fringe report or the home local? But then from there, if we need to go even further, maybe they have agreements between unions where the dues should still go back to their home local. So do not apply the dues to their to the work local. So you can start to build in those reciprocity rules again, so that we know MITRE's fringe reports across your unions are going to be accurate and up to date without having to, create a million different classifications like you might have to in Sage 300. And then also versions, essentially allowing you to clone or duplicate this Local 1 and create a new pay rate table with the updated rates set and effective date, so that just kicks in automatically when that happens, in the middle of a week, next week, or whatever it might be. So just a ton of power across those union rates. And then obviously different for the prevailing wage rates, but similar process, right? We assign this table to a project. I'd say the big key piece here is, different from unions. These fringes are required to be paid to the employee either in the form of benefits or cash. So when you do apply this to a project, if you are currently contributing to your employees' benefit plans and you want to take credit for the benefits that you're contributing to and deduct that from the fringe portion of the prevailing wage rate, MITRE will automatically do that for you. And on every single timesheet, union or non-union, will show you exactly how we're paying your team. So we could click into this timesheet for July 8th. We could come into pay rate and see, hey, this is the Adams County pay rate table that you assigned to the project. We are paying John the electrical master classification. That is a $60 base rate, $25 in fringes that we need to pay them. But MITRE is actually offsetting all $25 through employer fringe contributions. So we're only paying, Johnny here, $60 an hour. And so if we have questions, hey, how are we taking credit for that $25? Again, we on this timesheet can click into contributions and just understand all of the benefits that I'm enrolled in and what we're taking credit for. If we scroll over one of them, we'll show you, you are contributing $225 per pay period to the Kaiser plan in this instance, divided by 40 hours. We are now taking $5.63 and deducting that from the cash portion of the fringe that you need to pay out. So a lot of little nuances within the prevailing wage union payrolls that MITRE will just do very easily. Again, just to ensure that your team out in the field is really just responsible for making sure those hours are correct across those different projects and cost codes, which is a tall task as it is. And they can have confidence that from there, the overtime, the way those various pay rates get assigned, will be accurate and correct. And similarly, from a payroll perspective, your team is more so worried about any one-off changes I might need to make to a payroll, reviewing reimbursements or per diems, making sure all of our PTO requests are in, rather than working out of Excel to adjust fringe contributions and make sure folks are getting paid correctly. From there, obviously, MITRE being a full payroll processor, Tons of different options for your team. One, just a quick comparison mode from this view just to see any discrepancies in hours versus last week or earnings versus last week. But I think too, as we think of MITRE almost as an outsource payroll, a lot of folks will say that it's really very much an in-house process, right? Where up to this point, your team has been managing, reviewing, improving timesheets, making one-off changes to payroll if we need to adjust annual earnings or, change a benefit deduction for Desmond here. Maybe we're not going to take out anything. That is very much an in-house process where your team is reviewing and preparing the payroll. And ultimately, once the team gets in a good spot where they're ready to review and approve, we can click continue and essentially like pre-process this payroll. So we'll show you just the total liability, the cash requirement. You can come in here and run reports on the payroll itself prior to processing. So you could, generate a certified payroll and understand what that's going to look like. You could run a full payroll register and just see, employees' hours, earnings, employer taxes, benefit deductions, the fringes across all of your team. You could download this out of MITRE and review. And we can see what the ledger items are going to look like that we're syncing back to Sage with the level of detail that your team needs. Any sort of earnings or deductions, tax report we want to run on the payroll prior to processing, we can do so. So again, when we talk about MITRE being sort of an outsourced payroll, very much an in-house process where your team is really in complete control of all of the inputs and the review and approval process. It's just once we feel good about payroll, we can go ahead and click approve there in the top right corner. And that is where MITRE takes over, where we are debiting employer bank account. We are issuing the direct deposits to your team. We're generating the paper checks. We're pulling out the proper amount for taxes and remitting those on the schedule, doing the quarterly annual tax filings and the W-2s. So it's really just everything after the payroll preparation process that we would be offloading off the team's plate. And then from there, two other things I'll hit on, and then we can kind of turn it over and see if we have any questions or there are any other areas the folks want to go through. But obviously, for a lot of our customers, as soon as they process payroll, we have some mix or match of certified payroll reports that we need to get to. So we could come into our certified payroll reporting, and if we just need, if we have 4 projects ongoing that all need WH347, the Davis-Bacon report, we can just do all jobs with eligible earnings. Usually that's not the case. We might need to go one by one because specific projects need LCP tracker, relations, EMARs, whatever it might be. So we could come in here, select the job, the week, the state. From there, the state will prompt the different formats that are available, but all of your standard, state level, if there are specific city requirements, usually we're able to get those set up for your team. EMARs, relations, LCP tracker, or if we just need sort of standard WH347, can also add in other jobs if we wanted to generate like 2 of these at a time, and pull down all of those certified payroll reports. So just a pretty quick process for the team after we've processed payroll to come in here, select the job, the week, the state, and the format you need, and MITRE will spit out that report with just, every employee who was on the project that week, what they were paid, classification, hours worked each day, and, deductions broken out. So always like to show the WH347 just because this one you can actually understand what's happening. The LCP tracker is a CSV upload. I think relations might be like an XML file, so you can't really tell what's going on, but those are all ready to go and just be uploaded directly into LCP or relations. Awesome. And I would say one of the last big core pieces, right? We talked a lot about the integration and what that looks like, pulling down the work breakdown structure. But really the big piece of that is, again, we want to pull down that work breakdown structure. So, at the field level, folks are allocating the time at the projects, cost codes, and we have the departments, classes, locations, et cetera, that your team's using set up on the back end to track hours and costs against that. But as part of that process, after we sync down the work breakdown structure, we'll be mapping all of your GL accounts back to the different payroll benefit line items that you'll be using in MITRE, just so we know employee earnings go back to XYZ GL account. And we have different mappings based on departments if your organization is set up that way. But then from there, the real piece is, depending on the dimensions we're using in Sage, we can pull all of those in, and essentially across all of our earnings, taxes, benefits, workers' comp, we could come in here and break this out by those different dimensions. So, employee earnings, should we break that out by team member, by job, by cost code, cost type, department, location, class, work order, et cetera, really depending on how you are doing your job costing in Sage. And so this just gives your team a ton of control, essentially building out what these job costed journal entries should be. And you'll, again, be able to run this report within Payroll to actually see that level of detail prior to actually processing before this would push back to Sage and update your GL and your job cost reporting. So a lot of functionality within here. I'd say too with MITRE, one thing we do see is everything we're reviewing today. This is all customer facing. So there's nothing I'm doing here that is happening behind the scenes. Where your team would need to reach out to MITRE or do anything. I think a lot of times what we see in the industry is, folks have potentially tried this or reviewed an HCM provider just to reap all the benefits of the payroll processing side, or take advantage of some of the HRS pieces like applicant tracking, digital onboarding, performance management, LMS, and so they've gone with sort of a traditional HCM provider. And usually there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes, and it kind of leads to a clunky process. Whereas MITRE, this is all customer facing. It's built from the ground up for contractors. So, as you can see here, every single one of our customers, detailed job costing, right? Pulling down the work breakdown structure so we can allocate time and eventually not just earnings, but taxes, benefits, workers' comp, the whole shebang across, job, cost code, department, location, whatever dimensions you're using. Almost all of our customers are doing some level of certified payroll reporting or are union or non-union and juggling prevailing wage rates. And then also I'd say another big area or hiccup we've seen is job-based payroll taxes. So pulling down, that work breakdown structure from your ERP, as a part of the job comes the job address. And so if we have folks traveling across state lines or in, actions in Ohio where there's like 300 locality taxes. So based on the job's address, we know what local, state, or federal taxes should be applied to those earnings. So just a lot of the little nuances that the system was built around to streamline for you folks. So I've been talking a lot. I'll pause there. Sarah, I don't know if we have any questions in the chat or if there is anything specific folks want us to hit on with the last couple of minutes here.
We do have a question. Do you report to local states for quarterly reports, and do we do weekly reporting to the state?
Yep, MITRE will remit all of your weekly and quarterly taxes.
And then other question is, I think we answered this, but how everything flows into Sage. Can you just maybe go back to kind of the Sage diagram?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, it's a great question, Jody. And I guess I would preface this. There's really three separate answers here, depending on your Sage instance. With Sage Intact, obviously, we went through the accounting where we'll break out essentially building those job costed journal entries. And then from there, once that's done, like that is a direct API sync. So these, what does MITRE sync back to Intact? That would just be after payroll's processed, we are automatically pushing back those detailed labor costs to hit your GL and your job costs. And so with Intact, very seamless process. With Sage 300, this is going to be a JCD file upload. So it is not API based on the way back. We'll still pull down the work breakdown structure from 300, jobs, cost codes, everything like that will sync over. But after payroll's processed, that would be a file upload. It's a JCD file that hits your job costs, gets processed there, and then the GL. And then for Sage 100 folks, it is a similar process. It's a file upload, but we actually work with Right Office Solutions, who some of y'all, if you're on 300 or 100, are probably familiar with. We work with them. They have a portal that you can essentially upload your MITRE labor cost into that will then push and hit your Sage 100 job costs and GL. So slightly nuanced, just dependent on how or what system you're using, and happy to dive into that, with you separately. But high level, Sage intact, all API based, Sage 300 or 100, you'd be looking at a file upload to get labor costs back.
Alrighty, awesome. Well, it looks like that is all of the questions that we have. And if if there are no further questions right now, that's totally fine. But if you do think of any questions in the future, please feel free to contact any of the presenters or myself directly. And you're also welcome to reach out to your account managers, and they will be happy to answer any questions that you have. So again, thank you, John and Sarah, so much for the wonderful presentation. It's always great to see what you guys have for us. And just a reminder to our audience that we have provided a webinar survey. We ask that you please fill that out, as your feedback is really important to us. So with that, I want to thank you again for joining us, and everybody have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much.